Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, to wherever you are, and welcome to the first IEEE REACH webinar. We've done webinars with other groups. This is our first own webinar. Before we start, just a couple of quick housekeeping. One, this session is being recorded. If you should have received a message alerting you that, but just in case you didn't, it is being recorded. So if that makes you uncomfortable, we apologize, and feel free to log back off. Second of all, we're going to handle the questions and answers at the end. There is a Q&A function in Zoom. There's a chat function also for comments, but there's a Q&A specifically for questions. So please use the Q&A. We have someone monitoring that, and in the Q&A, that person will feed the questions to the panelists and also try and group them if the if different people are asking the same question. Feel free to put comments into chat. We're going to capture the chat for later, which will help us. And separate from the formal Q&A, we're hoping, you'll see at the end, we'll give you our contact information. We're hoping that a dialogue will continue potentially offline, a conversation of where we can help you use the REACH program, and you can help us make the REACH program better. So if I could have the first non-title slide, please. So my name is Mike Gazelowitz. I'm the Senior Director of something called the IEEE History Center, and you'll see, or you should see, depending on your settings, the other two panelists. Tony Macrell is the head of the upper school at Saddle River Day School, but is also a curriculum consultant for us and one of our education champions. And then Kelly McKenna is the REACH program manager. So very briefly, for those who don't know, IEEE is the world's largest technical professional association. Basically, it's the worldwide organization for electrical, electronic, and computer engineers with almost 400,000 members in 160 countries. And one of the units of IEEE is a history center where historians and support professionals have a mission to help preserve research and make known the history of technology. I do want to point out that we do have a public-facing website called the ETHW, Engineering Technology History Wiki. You see the URL there. And again, we will send out the slides to all attendees afterwards. So we'll have them and don't have to take crazy notes. But then we have this separate REACH program, which is a site dedicated with free online educational resources for pre-university educators. And we work across, even though IEEE has its origins in electrical electronic engineering, we work across all engineering and technology disciplines. Next slide, please. So why REACH? We realized a few years ago that our more sort of university and adult aimed material was not really appropriate for the pre-university audience, and that's really where the challenge is. So the National Council for Social Studies, which some of you are familiar with, defines social studies as an integrated study of social science and humanities to promote civic competence. Social studies promotes knowledge and involvement in civic affairs. And I don't have to tell you, I hope, since you're all on the seminar here, that science and technology are actually human activities, are civic activities. And that's made clear if you look at the science standards. Again, probably, I know we have non-US folks on, but the next gen science standards probably in the US point out that advances in science, engineering, and technology have, and indeed have had, note the history element there, profound effects on human society. And in fact, in the NEEP analysis of technology and engineering literacy, it was found where the goal is defined as understanding, not just understanding and valuing technology, but understanding how it achieves its goals in a cultural context. It was found that there's a real need here, and we hope that REACH will fill that need. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over to the program manager, Kelly McKenna. We'll first show you a brief highlight video, and then describe to you what we came up with when we came to this decision that we needed to make history of science and technology available at the pre-university level.
Alrighty, hello everyone, and thank you for your time. I am going to go ahead and get this video started.
All hands on deck.
When I look through this instrument on both the mirror side and the window side,
You'd use a saw like this to carve the ice into blocks that would then be stored.
We have our tuned circuit here. We have our crystal detector here.
The activity part of it, getting them out of the desks and out of the classroom and moving around, they're happy to do that and they're excited to do that.
And analyze the impacts of the trireme on Athenian history.
It really becomes complementary. It's a beautiful complement of history, society, technology, and learning.
Now I've got one page impression, but I need the second page.
You can take the decal off. There's your piece of paper.
But Hertz thought them worth testing.
They use science to create it. They use prior knowledge to create it. What is it?
Technology.
Excellent. Thank you. Everybody, please write that down. Awesome job. Please write down. It shows the impact of technology on history.
So that'll give you a little bit of an idea about what the REACH program is. Some of you I know who are on this webinar actually are probably a little more familiar with the program, but there are people who are not. So I'm going to take you through the website and a little bit more about the program. So REACH actually stands for Raising Engineering Awareness Through the Conduit of History. It is a free open education resource program that was created for both middle and high school teachers and obviously their students, which is secondary school age 12 to 18. It provides teachers and students with educational resources that actually, as Mike shared, explore the history of technology. And it really highlights how technology throughout time impacts society, culture, politics, economic, and how in turn those social aspects influence the technology itself. While it was designed for the social studies, there is also a relevant mix for it with STEM teachers, as it also meets the next gen science standards. And the other great thing about the REACH program is that it is applicable for both in-person as well as remote learning, because everything on the program is in fact downloadable. The program is also standard aligned. It is aligned here in the United States with the social studies standards, the C3 framework through the National Council for Social Studies, which is their college, career, and civic standards, also the Common Core standards. It is also tied to and associated with the next generation science standards, specifically the ETS 2 and 1, A and B, which are the cross-cutting concepts associated with the influence of science, engineering, and technology, society, and the natural world. The other one that it also meets is the International Technology and Engineering Educator Standards. And these are standards on technology and engineering literacy. These were actually revised this year. And when they made the revisions, they actually added in the social context of technology, which to the right of my screen here, you will see that that's actually what the standards are. It gives you the practices. But the standards that they've included that are new disciplines are in fact the history of technology. So REACH is actually ahead of its game and something that is being used in technology and engineering literacy. The goal of the program is to engage students in the history of technology, encourage its examination and its relationship with society, to enhance students' skills in problem solving, critical thinking, communication, and obviously to improve technology literacy skills of students across the globe so that they may be informed citizens of our high-tech society. These are all of the things that are included in the REACH program. We have inquiry units or lesson plans, primary source documents, which are original documents or evidence, such as an artifact, a document, or recording, something that was created during the time of study. We have engaging videos that are student videos. You can download those and show them, either have the students watch them at home or in the classroom. We also have hands-on activities, background information for the teachers, because we recognize both in the sciences as well as also in the social studies that teachers may not necessarily have the information they need to feel comfortable teaching the program. So we actually give you the background information on that specific technology's history. And then we also provide additional resources, and I will share those with you, and it's all available via the REACH website. So I'm going to go ahead and share the REACH website. Hopefully everybody is seeing that now, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. When you come to the website, you will see inquiry units, which are our lesson plans, primary sources, multimedia, and hands-on. If you scroll down, these are the content areas that REACH actually looks to touch on, from agriculture and manufacturing to medicine and warfare. Not all of these are filled yet. We're constantly populating them. And then if you scroll down, we have a nifty bit of information here. Every day we post something of what happened today in history. Now I'm going to share with you, if we go to, and I actually click on inquiry units, this is the best way to really use the website. If you click on inquiry units and then you scroll down, you are going to see all of the inquiry units that, or lesson plans that are available. I'm actually going to scroll all the way down to the printing press because Tony is going to touch base on this. And if I click on learn more, this is how you really want to get into this specific unit. And I'll share with you why. From here, you can download the unit. And I'm not going to go into detail here because Tony is going to touch a little bit on this. But our units are in a inquiry design model. And it does start with an overarching compelling question, followed by then supporting questions. We then also do give formative performance tasks. We give featured sources, which were the sources that the historians used when they created the lesson plan in case you want to delve deeper. And then we also, this one happens to have alternative formative performance tasks and additional resources. But when you get down to the bottom, and again, Tony is going to touch on this, we also highlight taking informed action. I'm going to continue to scroll down because this here will give you an idea. We do a staging the question that gives some more background information. You can either use this on your own or share this with students to read. And then if you scroll even further down, you're going to see these printed documents. These are all going to be excerpted documents that will address each supporting question. All of documents that begin with a 1 go back to supporting question 1. Anything that is document 2 goes back to supporting question 2, and so on. And they are excerpted documents. They could be from a book that's excerpted, or they could be a photograph. And these you can pick and pull and choose the ones that work best for you for your classroom. So it's pretty extensive, and it was designed that way so that you have an option as a teacher to take those excerpts and sources that will work best for you. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back here. So I'm back to from inquiry unit to the printing press. If you scroll down, you will see background information. You can download another PDF that will give you information. That's the teacher background information I was talking about earlier. But then if you scroll all the way down, and this is the important part because I have found that some teachers are not aware that this is available here. Rather than looking for primary sources and searching from the navigation bar, go in from the actual inquiry unit, because when you click on these buttons, you will actually find the primary sources that tie back to that specific unit. And the interesting thing about the primary sources that are all available that are here, if you click on learn more, you can then download it as a PDF, or you can actually visit the source and have the students go to the source. So on this one, if I visit the source, this actually, I believe, comes from Berkeley. So I'm going to go back again. Some go to a museum, some go to an archive. So I'm going back again to the buttons. Same thing with the multimedia. If you click on it, you will find the videos that are tied to that unit. And the same thing with the hands-on activity. For the STEM teachers in the webinar, something that's really interesting here too is we also do provide interdisciplinary and other source materials. So these actually, many of them do come from our Tri-Engineering, which is another program within IEEE that focuses more on design applications. So you can actually click on these and it will take you to a lesson that ties to this lesson from the design perspective. And with that, I am going to go back to my PowerPoint. And I'm going to go these slides here. When we share the PowerPoint presentation with you, it just highlights the 9 units that are available on the website, that the primary sources, as well as the hands-on activities. And then this is a sample video. I'm going to go ahead and play this. And when it's done, I'm going to actually turn it over to Tony, who's going to talk a little bit more about best practices in using REACH in the classroom.
Elevators are one of the most important criteria of a skyscraper. Before elevators, buildings were 4 or 5 stories because people didn't want to walk up that many floors. So elevators made it possible to go to 10 stories, then 20, then 30, and up from there. Early elevators were hydraulic, and one of the most important inventions within elevators was Elijah Otis, who at the Crystal Palace in New York City, which is kind of like the World's Fair in the 1880s, he had just patented his new safety mechanism. So before then, if the cable snapped or cut, it was really dangerous because the elevator would just fall. And he made a safety mechanism that if something happened to the cable, the elevator would catch itself on the cage of the shaft. And he had his men cut the cable in front of hundreds of people watching, and everyone thought he was gonna fall, and it just caught itself right on the shaft.
So that'll give you an idea of some of the student videos. And before I turn it over to Tony, I also want to mention that REACH is in fact a fully donor-funded program. We are grateful for all of our donors, and that is how we are able to make the REACH program free. So Tony, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kelly. Once again, welcome everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. I want to start by just mentioning the video that Kelly just played highlights an enabling technology for building higher structures. And I find that a really interesting place to start with kids a lot of times, because they don't really think about all the other requirements. So for instance, in the skyscraper, they don't think about the other requirements that are necessary to make skyscrapers. You know, it's easy for them to quickly imagine, well, we need to come up with a structure that'll hold itself up, but they don't think about how you're going to get to the top. And so not only is the elevator an enabling technology to help build the structures higher, but of course the Otis safety system was the thing that makes elevators, brings them into widespread use, and people felt safe using the elevator. So I think that's it's a really interesting place for kids to start, because it makes them start asking questions. And that brings me back to, how I use this thing in the class. And Kelly mentioned the inquiry design model is how we've designed the entire website. And for those of you who have used inquiry learning before, I mean, it'll be familiar, right? And so that's, I think, a strength of the REACH website is that it's all designed around inquiry. So getting kids to ask better questions and then guiding them through the process of how to not only find answers, but in many cases to ask further questions, And so I think what I'll do is I'll start here with just the way that I would use a unit, say the printing press. This is one that I use every year. I'm a European history teacher. It seems that whether I teach World or Euro, I can integrate the printing press pretty easily. And Kelly mentioned that one of the best ways to use our program is to download the entire inquiry unit, and I would agree. I think that as a teacher, I can sort through the unit once I've downloaded it, but in general, I use the unit as it's designed. And so let me give you some background on how I would use, say, the printing press. So first of all, the inquiry model starts with a compelling question, and that's a question for me anyway that's going to be a big, interesting question that can hook the students a little bit. And then the supporting questions, which I'm going to talk about here, are designed to kind of break down the big task of the big question into some relevant and helpful research questions. So in this case, one of the questions that I discuss in European history all the time is the most important. And high school kids, they understand this question. What's most important? Early in the year, I'll talk about defining most important with the kids. Is it most important because it was most influential? Is it over the long term? Is it most important because it changed things in the moment? And that's something that kids wrestle with. But the printing press as the most important innovation or invention in history, it's a very common question that teachers ask in high school, and you can compare it with any number of things. I mean, agriculture, whatever. There's a number of different ways you can go with it. But that's where the printing press unit fits in my class. So as we get into the supporting questions for this unit, one of the questions is the impact of printing on society, and in that question, we have a couple of different. We have actually several documents. I've included two here. You can't really read them, but basically, document 2A is printing's impact on Luther's message. So the students by this time, when I do this, by this time will be familiar with Martin Luther and the Reformation. And so this document, actually, the author is explaining how Luther's message was changed by the printing press technology. And that's, I think we would all be familiar with the fact that it spread more widely, but it also tended to change the message a bit inherently. And then 2B further goes on to Luther's impact on the printing industry, which is something that the kids didn't really think about. And then we start talking about the interplay between how technology is used and then how history is impacted. And in this case, Luther quickly realized that if he came up with 8 pages, that was a single sheet. It was easy for the printer to make, easy to distribute. And so after his initial work, his initial document, the 95 Theses, pretty much everything afterwards, he wrote to fit in the 8 pages so that could get distributed quickly. And printers love that. So, naturally they were looking to distribute something that would attract an audience. So, and then these documents, they're bite-sized, so to speak. Each of these, you see the blue writing at the bottom. I mean, each of them is connected to what Kelly was referring to as the primary sources, that is the original sources. And you could always go back to those sources and let the kids explore those larger documents. But I like to use these one-page bite-sized pieces because a lot of what I'm trying to teach kids is how to think like a historian, so I kind of limit some of the variables. In this case, if the document is just too long, it could be 30 pages long, the kids get lost in the whole reading comprehension end of it. Whereas here, I can make it more manageable for them. So I use SAC. If you're a high school teacher, I'm sure you have your own little acronym for reading techniques. This is summarize, analyze, criticize. Basically, summary is a really difficult skill for kids these days because they cut and paste for a living. So, back in the day when I was a kid, if I wanted to get out of the library quickly, I had to be able to summarize quickly. Now they don't have to do that. But so summarize is the first thing they have to be able to do. And if you have a one-page document, it's easier to teach them to summarize. Analyze is connecting this information to something else that they already know. So if we're into this inquiry, then we already have learned something about the printing press and its impact on history. And now, how does this document impact that? Does it reinforce what we already knew? Does it challenge what we already believed to be true? And then criticize is basically a critical analysis of the source. And I think that as a history teacher, that's one of the most important skills that I can teach kids, is to help them to understand that not all sources, in fact, no written sources are objective. Okay, they all come with the baggage of the author. So knowing who the author is, when it was written, what was the purpose of it, helps us to better understand why the source might be written as it is. So Kelly, you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Additionally, when you go through each of the supporting questions, you're getting your kids closer and closer to being able to talk about and address the big compelling question. But when you get to the end of this, we have a summative performance task. So along the way, Kelly pointed out that every supporting question has a formative task associated with it. It's a way that the kids can use the documents that are included under that question to demonstrate that they understand this a little better. It's basically like a benchmark for the teachers and the students to understand how well they learned this stuff. And then at the end, they want to address the compelling question. And you can see that each of these is going to look at a thesis argument addressing the compelling question. And as a teacher, I have the ability to put this in any form I want. Sometimes I have kids write an essay. I'm an AP teacher, so often I have kids write an essay because that's something they have to be able to do later. But the extension activity is often more of an alternate form of showing that they understand the argument, and in this case, it's a trifold board as an example. And one thing that I think a lot of people, including myself, find really helpful is the taking informed action section, because what this does is connects the entire unit. So now they've learned about, all kinds of things about how the printing press has impacted or helped to impact society, politics, religion, and then taking informed action is now, how can you connect all of this to your own life or to the current society, the current history? How is this useful today? And so what we came up with was that social media is really kind of the new printing press, or the new version, right? I mean, just the easiest example of this is that fewer kids in my high school are walking around with books in their hands. Most of them are walking around looking at their phones. So they do read the news. I mean, my kids are relatively well informed in terms of knowing what's going on, but where they get their news is very different from where I got it. So nobody's walking around with the New York Times under their arm or anything. They're looking at their phone and reading BuzzFeed or whatever else is their preferred news source, Twitter, and then this asks them to understand how important that is in changing today's political, social landscape, and then to assess the advantages and disadvantages of relying on social media for these. So it really asks them to look within and say, well, what am I getting out of this? Am I analyzing this stuff critically? And then take action. Choose a significant cause and try to create a social movement. I've actually done this project with my kids every year since we designed this unit. It's one of my favorite things. I think this unit came out several years ago. When I first did it, we did a Facebook thing. Now we're doing Instagram and Snapchat. And the idea for the kids is to see how far they can push this idea. So I think taking informed actions is a way for kids to find and explore the modern connections. All right, Cal. So another example, and this is using our radio inquiry unit, and the big compelling question that we start with is, in what ways was broadcast technology used to impact history? And again, notice the way it's phrased. We're trying to get them away from the mentality that the broadcast technology itself impacted history. It was really the way it was used. And I think one of the strengths of the unit is that it starts out with laying some context. So you have your compelling question, you have your supporting questions, but the first thing that the kids do, they actually work with, is called staging the question. And in the radio unit, for instance, staging the question is a series of pictures. And these pictures help kids to see the various ways that broadcast technology has been used throughout the 20th century, basically. And it's easy for kids to relate to pictures. It's easy, I think, for teachers to try and make points with these, pictures worth 1,000 words, so to speak. So I think that that's very useful. Also, I should point out that staging the question in every unit, we have a staging section that is specifically written and designed to be digested by high school students or even middle school. I mean, it's for students. We have an additional section that you download with the unit called the teacher background section, and that is a more expansive background or contextualization of this unit, and it's designed for teachers. Often, this is really the historians who did the research are speaking directly to the teachers here, whereas the staging the question section of the unit is designed for students, so it's much more digestible by students. So in this case, the staging question discusses the concept of innovation. And in this photo, this is just one example, it's a photo of German children listening to a nationalist broadcast in the 1930s. You can see the date on there. It's the Air Force Day, Luftwaffe Day of on March 1st, 1939 in Berlin. So of course, I don't need to tell you the historical context of this, but it's useful for kids to see how the Nazis were indoctrinating their children, or could have indoctrinated their children using these kinds of broadcasts in a large setting. So how might history have been changed is an easy question for kids to grasp, and it creates a little bit of discussion at the beginning of the unit. I think you can go to the next, right? Thank you. Well, you're way ahead of me, Cal. Nice job. So, and here in this one, we're looking at one of the documents that's it's linked. This particular document is linked to a website, so I've included when you click the link, where you go. This particular supporting question talks about who was or what was more important, were inventors or entrepreneurs. This kind of contrasts Armstrong and Sarnoff in particular, but it's really looking at a question we always address in my class, which is, is history driven by people or by like large scale movements? Is it individuals or large scale movements? And in this case, we're looking at the impact of two individual people. So who introduced the critical innovation? Was it the inventor who provided for the advancement of broadcast radio? Or was it the entrepreneur who figured out how to sell this stuff and market it to a larger audience? And this particular document goes to the David Sarnoff library. I think that these documents that link you back to the websites, this particular website, in fact, this can be used really well in a 1 or 2 day class to introduce a Socratic seminar or a group debate, and that's how I would use it. I think if I'm not mistaken that Mike might want to jump in here. You might want to go. This is 16, right? Yeah. So I think what I want to do is turn it back over to Mike, because he is the professional historian, and I think that what I've been talking about is the impact of technology and the interaction of technology in history. But I think, Mike, you could speak better to the interaction between technology and science, right? So.
Right. So next slide, Kelly. Right. So just I like to finish really quick. So I do. So I'm not seeing a lot of questions. So a reminder: you don't have to wait till the Q&A, because I'm going to wrap up in just a couple minutes. And feel free to throw questions in you already have, or as they come up in the next 2 or 3 minutes. So then we can really get a jump start on the Q&A session. But in the meanwhile, right. So it was mentioned a couple of times. We actually originally envisioned this as helping history teachers like Tony put technology in the classroom, because it's in the standard and it's very difficult to do if you're not trained. So our professional science of technology, working with education experts like Tony, are trying to create a program that would really answer those things. But as I mentioned at the very introduction, more and more folks came to us and said, well, I can use this in the STEM classroom, because really Next Gen is also talking about social impact and social context of science and technology and engineering and mathematics. But the interesting thing that we learned as we move forward is that there's another piece that, in a sense, is unique to the way the science standards look at it, and to a secondary extent to technology standards, which is science and technology are closely related but they're two different endeavors, human endeavors. They're both human endeavors. They both impact society and are impacted by society, but they impact each other, and they're extremely closely aligned. That's why we talk about STEM, right? We don't know, everything today is we're not saying, well, just we're just going to teach science, but we're going to teach STEM because the things are interrelated, and REACH helps you do that. And the radio units that Tony has just introduced, talking about social issues like entrepreneurs versus inventors, is a perfect example. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through this in detail. We are, as I said, we're going to share the slides with the attendees after the fact. And this is, by the way, this is all in the radio unit. But just to remind you, in the mid-19th century, scientists and mathematicians were trying very hard to understand light and electromagnetism. But at the same time, engineers were trying to improve telecommunication, which at that time was based on sending electricity through wires. Right now, we know now that's closely related, but it seems, to the layperson like a different phenomenon. So almost simultaneously, James Clerk Maxwell, who was a mathematical physicist or a physical mathematician or applied mathematician, call it what you will, in Scotland, realized that you could come up with equations to unify electricity and magnetism, and indeed predicted, therefore, that there would be waves of electromagnetic energy at frequencies that the human eye could not detect. Meanwhile, the telegraphy people were figuring out what can we do with more sophisticated with electric signals and wires, and they came up with sending voice over wire telephony. And I have over on here some of the examples. I can't show you because Kelly's sharing the screen, so I can't point, but some of the important people and the important events, including the plaque in the upper right is an IEEE milestone. IEEE recognizes historical events, and if you can make it out, you'll see Maxwell's equations on the bottom, which you also saw in the introductory video that Kelly showed. So this is math and science. Now, in 1888, Hertz demonstrated that the waves indeed existed, and that meant everyone immediately realized that if you can send and receive electromagnetic signals, then you can use them for communication. And therefore that wireless communication was telecommunication. So originally wireless telegraphy, ultimately wireless telephony. And in fact, interestingly, and I'm not going to go into detail, but we do go into detail in the unit, right? Marconi, who was an engineer and inventor, and particularly an entrepreneur, who managed to be the first one to demonstrate transatlantic transmission, which, by the way, was not understood by the scientists until a little bit later. But he said, well, let me try this and let me play with different antenna configurations. He actually got the Nobel Prize in physics for this work that was clearly engineering work. So that's another way to approach the students who probably have heard of Nobel Prize, sort of approach this idea of science versus technology versus engineering versus mathematics, and how they're the same and how they're different and how they interact. Next slide. Right. So at this point, we'd like to open the floor to questions. Again, please use the Q&A function. And while we're waiting for that, Kelly, if I could have the next slide. So please use the Q&A function to ask any questions. So you can think about, and we are going to follow up, asynchronously or whatever, about how you might, either if you're a teacher and you have already used REACH, or if you're planning to, or I hope this webinar convinced you to use it, and the how you would use the REACH resources. We've put together, working with Tony and some other educator champions, some best practices, which I think Tony already mentioned. So we have the compelling question, supported question, and background information. He mentioned that we have a separate teacher background, which is a little more sophisticated, though again, depending on your class, you may choose to share some or all of that with your students, or not, depending on the level of the class and some other issues. We review how we're going to stage the question. All of this can, by the way, be chunked down depending on the kind of course you're teaching and the level of students you're teaching, right? You don't have to you could use our background, but not our stage of the question. You could use our primary sources, but come up with some different questions. So there's a range of ways that that REACH can be used. But as Tony mentioned, we're really hoping that for people who are teachers who have not a lot of time to prepare new stuff or research new stuff, that we can really give them a turnkey way. So if you're talking about communication in the beginning of the 21st century, we have you can use this unit as a unit. if you're talking about, everyone talks about, as Tony mentioned, either in Euro or AP Euro or AP Global or World or whatever it's called in your particular context, and even outside the US context. Everyone talks about the impact of the printing press. This enables you, a turnkey unit, to talk about the printing press. And Tony mentioned the summative performance task, and then mentioned how he's gotten really good use out of the informed action piece. So next slide. So we're going to reach out to you afterwards. Here's how you can reach out to us, but I just want to double check. Davion, I'm not seeing any questions. Am I missing any? Okay, so our back office person is telling me there aren't any questions. I guess, Kelly, if there aren't any questions.
Here's Son.
Wait, okay. So Mary wants to know, and I don't know if this is a Kelly question or a Tony question, but if students use the site itself for research, are proper citations available?
Yeah, I can address that. So all of the citations at the bottom of the print documents, in fact, every document, the citations are in the Chicago format. They're designed that way, and you know, when necessary, there are notes at the top to explain, you know, further where the document came from. Generally speaking, though, you can get it all from the source line at the bottom, and then following, you know, because a lot of our stuff is linked to a website, you know, in the Chicago format, you'll have a link to the other to the other site.
Great, that was a great question. Thank you, Mary. And yeah, did that spark anybody else's questions? Again, so we showed the last slide very quickly, which was how to contact us, but there may have been contact information on the invite, I don't remember, but we will send off contact information following this. One of the things we're going to give you an opportunity for those who are not, that we have a newsletter. There it is. So here's how you can follow us in various ways. So Kelly, did you want to add anything before we let the people go back to their busy days?
I would just share, if anybody does have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. And as Mike had originally shared as well, we would absolutely love it if you could provide us with some feedback about how you are utilizing it in the classroom. For those of you who may not have used it yet, again, hopefully this webinar has intrigued you enough that you will try to use the REACH resources in the classroom. We would love your feedback. You can send that to myself. Davian, actually, if you could put my email in the chat, that would be great.
Already done.
Oh, super. I can't see the chat while I'm sharing the screen. So, and I don't know, any other questions come in while I was sharing that?
I'm not seeing any, Davion. Any questions? I don't think so.
So can I just mention one final note? You know, if you have seen this, and you know, like myself, if you're a high school level, a secondary teacher, you know, sometimes when you see these kinds of resources, they seem overwhelming. Like, how would I ever squeeze this into my lessons? But I think that the way it's organized around the IDM, it makes it very straightforward for you to download it and look over the first couple pages, and you can pick and choose what documents you'd like to use. To be honest, there are, in many cases, you could even choose the supporting questions and the formative assessment pieces to use. The thing is that you can adapt it. It just takes a little bit of prep work, and that's why under the best practices, I said, like, the first thing I do is think about the big compelling question and the supporting question. So do those fit into my lessons? And then I review the teacher background, so I'm familiar with all that, and then go from there. Then I choose things. What do I want my kids to do? And it's totally adaptable that way.
Tony, you actually bring up another point. Something that we have learned as well is obviously the taking informed action brings it to modern day. But also too, for our international folks out there, I would strongly encourage that you actually make those more local, and even not the international folks, even those here within the United States, make them local to your area and to your students and to your classroom, because that again has that much more of an impact, I think, on the students insofar as for them making it relevant to their lives today. So just something else I wanted to touch on. Anybody else? Mike, you have anything else?
No, I just want to, first of all, thank you, Kelly and Tony, for great presentations. Thank everybody who attended for your time and support. So those so positioned, which is doesn't tend to be teachers, when you get to the site, you'll have an opportunity to support the site if you want. But we hope actually that you will use the site and that will help you in the classroom and help technological literacy more broadly in society. And that, again, you will give us feedback. As you see, there'll be an opportunity to sign up for the newsletter, which will also, I think the newsletter will alert you when we have a blog on the site, when there's new informative information on the site, when, of course, when we add new content. So we encourage you to sign up for the newsletter, but to reach out to us in whatever way is easy for you. And again, Kelly's email, we'll send it with a follow-up, but it's also available in the chat. So with that, thank you everyone again very, very much. And everyone have a great day. Or those, I know we have some guests on. Kelly didn't mention, we actually did a pilot program in Uganda, in Africa. So it's much later in the day for them. Wish them, I think a couple of them are on. So I wish them a good evening. And everyone take care. And we look forward to doing in-person seminars and workshops next year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.